Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. I hope and trust that you are all well. Before I get started, I would like to give a very special shout out to the Patreon members. Samantha, Victoria Dyer, Tina Mead, Nancy Wallace, Mana Ash, Felicia Scott, Cindy Cleveland, House of Jen, and the others are listed right here on the screen. Thank you all so much for becoming a part of the new membership. If you would like to become a member of Back to Ashes right here on YouTube, or become a Patreon member, or would like to support a content creator such as myself, you can buy me a coffee. All of that information can be found in the description below. With all of that being said, it is time to go back to ashes. For when we arise from the ashes, we are a bigger, brighter, stronger, and happier person in the morning. Sit back, relax, kick back, grab a snack, or tuck in and get warm, and prepare for this dose of vocal melatonin entitled True Scary Reddit Stories. Right after this introduction, an ad will play. I'll read the first story, an ad will play, and after that there will be no more ads within this video. This is not my story, but my mom's. In the summer of 2012, when my mom was just 30, she had a habit of jogging late at night on the track in the forest. Our town is small, considered safe, and it's a big tourist destination. The track in the forest is illuminated by streetlights, and it's visible in the front and back, but sides are full of trees and it's completely black when it's dark. She was jogging one night as usual, but got scared without any reason and felt like she was being watched or followed. She continued jogging for a few more minutes, but heard something behind her and turned around to see what it was. She saw a pair of jeans in the middle of the track. She immediately ran away, got in the car, and got home. 2 days later, the body of a 31-year-old Mexican woman was found in a shallow grave and covered with branches in that same forest. The murderer had sliced her throat so deep, he almost decapitated her. It was all over the news. He was caught and sentenced, but is eligible for parole in 2027, all because of the plea bargain he took. To this day, I believe my mom wasn't going to be the target, but rather a witness and collateral damage that night if she hadn't ran away. I have an outside entertainment system that I use a lot during the summer. It's a large projection screen and some outdoor furniture. We use a projector to watch movies late into the night during the summer. My 15-year-old son and I were out there watching a movie one night. It was around 2 or 3 in the morning. Suddenly, I hear a clicking noise. It sounds like electricity clicking on and off. It also sounded a bit like the snapping of a fire. I live on a farm with miles of acreage, so I started to get worried that a freak fire had started. I paused our movie and listened. My son quickly whispered, "I hear it too." I always bring a flashlight out there with us. I picked it up. It's a Roy shop flashlight, so it's very bright. I shined it out into the open field behind us. I couldn't see anything, but I could still hear the noise. Suddenly, I froze. I was shining the flashlight out onto the field, but I wasn't. Like the beam of light stopped maybe 10 feet away from me. It was like the light was reflecting back at me, like it had hit something I couldn't see. I moved the flashlight to the side, and the beam spread out over the ground like it should have. My son, who was afraid of nothing, started to panic, and that scared me. I mean, this kid isn't afraid of anything. He loves true crime and missing people documentaries and horror stories, etc., and never has nightmares because of them. He's never been afraid of the dark or anything like that, so the fact that he was scared meant there was something to be afraid of. He suddenly says, "It's a glimmer man, Mom. We have to get out of here now." I had no idea what he was talking about. I'm not into the supernatural, and I hadn't heard of that one. I escorted him back into the house and then went out to collect our projector and other items we left out there. I couldn't leave that stuff out there. The noise had stopped by the time I got back out there, so I wasn't as afraid. Once I collected everything, I decided to take another look. I needed to make sure a fire had not started. I shined the flashlight around, and suddenly, the beam was blocked and then unblocked. It was like something had run through the beam of light. I was really scared by that point, so I ran into the house. Later, I looked up accounts of the Glimmer Man, and it seems like what I saw. I'm sharing this true story I found on Tudat recently. I want to share my cousin's experience here. This happened somewhere in Orlando. My cousin had to go home late because he had to work overtime. It was around 11 p.m., he says, when he noticed the woman walking a few meters away from him. There was something about her demeanor that caught his attention. She seemed nervous and constantly glanced over her shoulder. As he continued walking, his eyes were drawn to a white van parked a short distance away. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, grabbed the woman forcefully, and shoved her into the van. The scream of the woman could be heard trailing off as the van screeched away. My cousin was too stunned to do something. He wasn't able to look at the license plate. He wasn't even sure if it had one. Luckily, there were several other people around the area who witnessed the same thing. Someone called the cops, and my cousin gave his statement. As he recalls the story, he realized how bold the kidnappers were to execute their plan on a fairly busy street. Even if it was near midnight, some people for sure would witness it. The rest of his night was filled with questions. Who was the woman? Why was she targeted? And most importantly, could he have done anything to prevent the kidnapping? A similar case resurfaced in the news days later, and just hearing it happen again traumatized my cousin. Has anyone else heard of a white van kidnapping before? I heard it was a problem in China, but it could be happening right here in the United States as well. My siblings and I live in the pretty rural countryside with only two neighbors, one to the front of our house and one to the right side of it. To the left of our house, we have pretty dense woods. Neither of our neighbors have children. It was late spring, early summer, and we had decided to play hide and seek in the woods, as we would do pretty commonly. We had been going for a few rounds, and it was my younger brother's turn to seek. So me and my sister decided to hide together. We crossed the creek and hopped over logs until we found a pretty wide tree to hide behind. We waited a few seconds and we heard my brother say, "Ready or not, here I come." I motioned her to stay quiet and get behind me to stay hidden. We sat there for minutes while I peeked around the side of the tree to watch my brother. At this point, I'm locked into the game and I'm not paying any attention. My sister nudges me and it caught me pretty off guard. So I look over and she's pointing at one of the trees near the abandoned shack behind us. I look to where she is pointing and I see what appears to be a kid anywhere from 10 to 13, peering around the tree looking towards us. The first thing I noticed is that he was wearing a green and white striped shirt. I looked at his face but saw nothing. His head was there, but he had no facial features, like a blank canvas. Quickly I got up and pulled my sister along and ran back towards the house. My brother was still looking for us, so as we passed him, we just told him to run and he followed us. We ran inside the house to tell our mom what we saw. She brushed it off as our imagination, but we insisted that we saw it. To this day, I don't know what it was, but my sister, who saw it first, is convinced that it had no face. I saw it only for a second, so what I saw could have just been my mind playing tricks. But I still wonder what it was, and why it was just watching us. few years ago, I experienced a terrifying encounter that left an indelible mark on my memory. It was a dark and stormy night when I decided to accept my friend's dare to explore an abandoned house rumored to be haunted. We ventured through deserted streets in search of this eerie dwelling. After an extensive search, we finally discovered the house nestled among the trees in a state of unsettling decay. The wind howled, causing the creaking boards of the house to add an eerie soundtrack to our approach. As we entered, a palpable sense of fear enveloped us. The interior was shrouded in a chilling atmosphere and suffocating darkness. The walls were covered in mold. The furniture was decrepit and covered in dust. Broken glass littered the floor, glinting ominously in the faint moonlight that filtered through cracked windows. It felt like stepping into a nightmare. As we cautiously explored each room, strange sounds echoed through the halls. A distant whisper, a door slamming shut, and the occasional shuffling footsteps that sent shivers down our spines. It was as if the house itself was alive, breathing with an ominous presence. In one room, we discovered a flickering candle, the only source of light. Its feeble glow cast dancing shadows that seemed to take on sinister shapes. The air grew heavy with an unexplained tension and an unidentifiable scent, like rotting wood and decay, assaulted our senses. Suddenly, a chilling gust of wind blew out the candle, plunging us into complete darkness. Panic set in as we fumbled for our flashlights, but when their beams cut through the blackness, we gasped in terror. The walls of the room were now adorned with eerie paintings that seemed to come alive before our eyes. The subjects depicted twisted figures and haunting scenes of torment. Their eyes followed our every move, and a malevolent energy filled the room. Overwhelmed by fear, we ran for the exit, desperate to escape the clutches of whatever haunted that forsaken place. The door slammed shut behind us, sealing the horrors within, but we could still hear faint whispers as we retreated. To this day, the memory of that night haunts my dreams. The abandoned house remains an unsolved mystery, leaving us wondering about the dark forces that once dwelled within its decaying walls. This spine-chilling experience taught me to heed the warnings of the supernatural and respect the unknown. Some mysteries are better left untouched, for the line between curiosity and terror can be crossed all too easily. Just moved to a new town alone, me and my dog. Went hiking early one morning on an old rail trail and met a fellow dog walker who told me there is a large group of them, other dog walkers, who meet up in a field each morning to let the dogs play. He invited me to join and I agreed, following him off the path. I was excited to meet new people and have a community. After walking deeper and deeper into a forest with no field in sight, I started to get no vibes. It may sound crazy, but there was a crow that had been in a tree chattering away on the rail trail. It had followed us off the trail, flying from tree to tree, and was squawking aggressively at us. You simply couldn't ignore it. Then, my BlackBerry beeped that I had lost service. It fully occurred to me that maybe I was in a vulnerable position. This man was much larger than myself, probably close to double my weight. We had been walking for about 30 minutes off trail now. I made up some lie about losing track of time and said I would have to head out. He tried to talk me into staying and how much fun my dog would have, reaching down to pet my doggo. Doggo lunged in a very aggressive manner, snapping and snarling at the man. Doggo was a 95-pound boxer. The man backed off and said, and I quote, "I'll let you go this time, maybe another day." We turned and hightailed it out of there so fast. The crow followed my dog and I all the way back to my car and didn't leave until I pulled away. I learned later there is no field through the forest and no dog route that meets there. A few years later, a woman's car was found abandoned in the area, and she is still missing 10 years later. This happened a few years ago. My aunt and uncle own a restaurant, and one Saturday they were moving from their old location to a new one. My aunt, uncle, future husband, boyfriend at the time, cousin, and about 10 other people, mostly employees, were helping in the move since there was a bunch of large equipment. We all were at the old restaurant packing things, tying them down when we ran out of ratchet straps. I offered to drive to my parents' house, about 30 minutes, to get more straps for my dad. Because everyone else was busy, I went alone. On the way back, I got a call from my aunt saying that they all were going to take a load to the new location and to meet them there. Since I didn't know how to get to the new place, I pulled over in a park to put in the address. From the road, you weren't able to see the parking lot at all because of the trees. The only odd thing that I didn't notice at the time was on the sunny weekend day, there were no other cars in the parking lot. I pulled into a parking spot and immediately grabbed my phone to put in the address. For whatever reason, I didn't put it in park like I normally do, which unlocks the doors. Less than a minute after I looked down, I heard and felt a huge hit to the car. I remember looking at him for so long, I thought it was odd how I couldn't see the color of his eyes because of how big his pupils were. It's important to note that I was in a small SUV and he had to bend over to look in the window. A second later, he was pulling on the door handle so hard I thought it was going to snap off. I was also confused why the door wasn't unlocked like it normally would be when I'm in a parking spot. He got visibly upset that the door wasn't opening, so he started banging the side of his fist against the window, swinging his whole arm over and over. Getting progressively more pissed, he moved to the door handle of the back seat, and at this point, I was so scared of him getting in the car, I grabbed and unsheathed the camping knife I had in my door. When I looked back at him, he stopped attacking the car, saw the knife, and smiled. I think it was right then I realized that he didn't want money. He didn't want to SA me. He wanted to kill me. I knew that if he got in the car, it was going to be over for me, even with the knife. He was way bigger than me, and hitting the car so hard, I was amazed that the windows held up. I guess I got comfortable with him not being able to get the doors open, but after bashing the back window a few more times, he began rocking the car back and forth until he eventually moved to the trunk. The panic got worse because I knew the doors weren't opening for some reason, but maybe the trunk would. Since it was an SUV, if he got in the trunk, he could just climb over the back seats and get to me. He hit against the back window with both of his balled-up fists and was yelling something I couldn't understand. Right then, I realized that I could slam it in reverse. I dropped the knife in my lap, put my gear shift into reverse, grabbed the wheel, and put my foot down on the gas. I still have no idea if I hit him or if he just jumped out of the way. I didn't look back. I put it in drive and peeled out of the parking lot. It was my first time ever ignoring a stop sign. I still have no idea why I didn't put it in park. Okay, so here's some background. I forget how old I was when this happened. Maybe 19-ish? It doesn't really matter. I've been friends with Jamie for a long time, so this story is in conjunction with her mirror story. I'm Leah from the story she shared. Anyway, I was hanging out with Jamie, Brittany, and let's just call her Muriel. We had spent the day together and decided to wrap it up with going to see a movie in theaters. Just as the movie was ending, Jamie got a call from her mom, and the poor woman sounded extremely spooked. She said something was in her house, but that she and Jamie's sister didn't know what it was. She asked us all to come over, so we left the theater and rushed over to her house. When we got there, I could sense something was just off. And apparently I wasn't the only one, because Jamie, Brittany, and Muriel unanimously agreed that they didn't like the atmosphere in the house either. Jamie's mother told us that she and Jamie's sister, we'll call her Ariel, were just hanging out in the master bedroom and watching some television when suddenly the family dog, Sammy, starts barking seemingly at nothing. They tried to calm him down, but he kept staring at the same spot on the wall where the bedroom door and bathroom section connected. At first, they couldn't see anything, but as they watched, Sammy got out of their grip and ran over to the wall, still barking and now growling too. As he did, a shadow suddenly revealed itself and glided up the wall and into the bathroom, where a curtain that had been secured down suddenly shot up with a bang, followed by a whirring sound before going silent. That's when they hurried downstairs and her mom called us. They didn't want to be alone there, and we didn't blame them. At a loss for what else to do, we all gathered in a circle and started praying. Jamie's mom told us all not to open our eyes until we were all done, but I glanced up because I was curious, and to this day, I wished that I hadn't. There, in the corner of the living room where we were at, I saw a figure standing there. It was blacker than black, like a solid mass that the light couldn't pierce. It was staring right at me. Scared me out of my wits. I immediately closed my eyes and started praying harder, and just like that, the air in the room cleared up. Like the heaviness had been sucked out of it, and everyone, including myself, felt lighter. We thought that was the last of it, so we all went out to the front porch to talk and joke around, to try to take the edge off and process, you know? Everything was fine for a few minutes when, out of nowhere, Sammy started barking like crazy and running down the driveway. I saw the same black figure sort of flying or floating or something down the driveway as Sammy tore off after it. And then it just sort of shot up and disappeared. Sammy stopped barking as soon as it was gone and trotted back over to us, tongue flopping, tail wagging, as if nothing had just happened. I'm not sure what it was or what happened to it, but to this day, the memory of that thing, whatever it was, lurks in a corner of my mind. Hello everyone. This is my first time telling this story. I'd like to warn you all that English isn't my first language, so my story will probably have some spelling mistakes or may not make sense in spots, but I'll try my best to write it just as it happened. This happened when I was 12, if I'm not mistaken. I live with my mom only, and we've always been poor. Not extremely, of course, but enough to make her struggle to pay the bills. It was December, a hard month for her. She worked at a gas station at the time, and she had to make some choices, so she didn't pay the internet bill, which led to a small house with no internet and consecutively no TV. So when I have finished dinner, I'd go to my grandma's house so I could watch TV until I fell asleep. Even if it was night, my mom wouldn't mind me going alone to my grandma's house, since it was just some seconds until I arrived there. As I stated before, it was December, so the Christmas tree was already set up. I let the TV on Disney Channel and started to read some stories on Wattpad, until I came across a weird book that caught my attention. Creepypasta research. I know that this may make you want to stop listening to my story, but please stay and hear me out. This story is very real. I need answers. As the weird kid who loved horror, I needed to know what was that, and so I clicked on the book and started reading. Even though I liked some of the stories, I didn't actually believe them. I still don't believe, actually, but I texted my friend, a girl that truly believes that they are real. Let's call her Jessie. Jessie said that she knew about the books, and she even made some research herself. It became a debate between us. Jessie said they were real. I said that they're not. As I wanted to prove my point, I texted something like, "Okay, Jessie, I'll prove it to you somehow, that they're not real. Just need to know how." She then said, "I dare you to summon one of them, but that would kill you." That, of course, convinced me. I found the easiest ritual and I did it. On the notes of the ritual, the author said, "You're not going to see anyone. Just feel the presence if the ritual works only. If that happens, don't try to look. Keep quiet until the feeling of being watched goes away." Okay, so nothing too complicated. Plus, it was the only ritual that, according to the author, has 0% chance of trying to kill me. Hey, I don't believe them, but I was a kid. I was scared that something could happen. Well, I did the ritual, but nothing happened. A feeling of unease, but nothing more. So I text Jessie with something like, "I'm here. They aren't real. I told you." She was taking too long to answer, so I went to sleep. An important thing to say is that my grandpa woke in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. So, as always, he turned the TV off, making the Christmas lights the only form of light in the living room. Yeah, I used to sleep on the couch just to watch TV. I woke up at about 3-4ish a.m., and when I opened my eyes, I saw something. Not the creepypasta I summoned. For the curious, it was Tiki Toby. I saw a sweater, a dark gray sweater. The face was black and the eyes a shining red. Maybe it was a mask. But the most disturbing thing about it was it had no legs. It was floating but immobile. I rubbed my eyes and I saw nothing. The thing went away. I didn't even tell my family, even though they believe in some paranormal things. Only my boyfriend knows about this. Now I'm sharing it with you. Please be kind. I know it's not the creepiest thing, but I was really scared and now very curious. Thank you for listening to my stories, and I'm awaiting all your suggestions. So this all happened when I was about 15 or 16. It was in 2005 or 2006, I think, way before the era of smartphones. My best friend at the time, we'll call her Mona, and I were proper emo kids, and we used to love finding cool locations to take photos. So I never went anywhere without my camera, and I used to keep it in my bag at all times. This will be important later. My parents' garden was pretty big for a suburban house, so when you were sitting on the patio, you'd have a lawn on one side and a jungly area on the other, with walkways throughout it. I had a really strong intuition when I was younger, and I remember one night I had Mona sleeping over at my house. My dad was away in a different city for work. My mom also had one of her friends over that night. We'll call her Sarah. I just remember being overcome with a really, really bad feeling. I just had a sense that something wasn't right, and Mona said she felt it too. We went to tell my mom and her friend, who were sitting outside on the patio. I even told Sarah to please not go home that night, because I was worried something would happen to her on the way home. I asked my mom and Sarah if they could please not stay outside for too long. They didn't seem too concerned, but they agreed anyway and eventually came inside. Anyway, Mona and I sat on my bed for a while, looking at the photos we had taken that day on my camera, before I eventually put my camera back in my bag next to the bed and we went to sleep. We were suddenly woken at 4 or 5 a.m. by my mom rushing into my room to check if we were okay. We immediately knew something was very wrong. She told us that someone had broken into the house, and we all started looking around to see if they had taken anything. At first, we couldn't find anything missing, but then, to my horror, I discovered that only my camera had been stolen from my bag, which was right next to me and Mona as we slept. The fact that nothing else was missing, like my mom's laptop, which she used to put in her cupboard at night, tells me that they didn't have time to look around for valuables, which means they must have been watching us the night before and knew exactly where I had put my camera. That creepy feeling we had that night was probably the feeling of being watched. I'm guessing that creep had been hiding in the bushes and watching us all night. I don't know what creeps me out more, the fact that they were right there watching us the whole night, or the fact he was in my room, just centimeters away from me, and we slept right through it. I shudder to think what could have happened if it weren't just a petty thief. It turns out that Sarah had fallen asleep on the couch downstairs, so my mom had not set the alarm that night. Sarah, me, and Mona all slept through the whole thing. Luckily for us, my mom is a really light sleeper, and she caught the guy and shouted him right out of the house. My mom is a total badass. This isn't the only time she had scared a burglar off. This experience taught me to always trust my intuition and always set the house alarm, no matter what. So, I live in the Appalachian Mountain Range, and something weird happened the other day. I was home alone with my cat and dog, and I had my living room window open because it was warm in my house, and I needed the fresh air. I was playing music, and there was a pause in the sound, and I heard someone call my dog's name from outside. I didn't think too much of it, and just thought that maybe someone close just had a pet or a child with a name close to my dog's name. But then it happened again. My dog was starting to pace around and whine. Just then, I realized how much it sounded like my mom, and it sounded close. If you don't know about the Appalachian Mountain Rule, basically if it sounds close, it's far, and if it sounds far, it's close. I wanted to shut my window because I was scared, but I also wanted to know how far away it was. I decided to shut my living room window and open my smaller kitchen window. I heard it again. My dog was freaking out, and this time it sounded farther. My hands were shaking, and I didn't want to hear it anymore, so I shut the window and took all of the pets and some snacks into my room, and I shut the door. I somehow fell asleep while watching YouTube. I woke up when it was dark out. My dad was home and my mom was not, because she was in New York City with her friends for the week. I was still scared, and so were my pets. My dog has been acting just a little off since that, and I took mental notes of everything odd that she does now. She paces around the house and whines just like she did on the night of the incident. She stares out of the windows whenever they are open. She will not go outside for any reason unless she has a leash on. She sometimes lies down on the floor in a weird and uncomfortable position and has whole body shivers every couple of minutes. She walks into corners of the house and will just stand there for a couple of minutes. She follows me everywhere: the bathroom, the laundry room, my room, etc. That's all I have noticed, but I'm still scared and weirded out at her change behavior. I'd like to hear some feedback on what this thing could have been and why my dog's behavior has changed so much. Side note, my cat's behavior has changed because frankly, I don't think she cares. If you were to ask me if I believed in the paranormal, I'd tell you I'm on the fence about it. If someone were to tell me a house is haunted, I wouldn't believe them unless I myself experienced something out of the ordinary. I believe that creepy things do happen, but I like to go into situations with the mindset of trying to rule out every possible cause before I come to a conclusion. If I can write something off as just coincidence or my mind playing tricks on me, then I will, and I'll leave it at that. This experience, though, was a little different. I still don't know what exactly happened really, and it hasn't happened since. I was on a Discord call with some of my friends. It was late at night, maybe 10 or 11, and I decided I'd start going about my nightly routine and get settled in for the night while on the call. I muted myself and went to brush my teeth, got my pillows all set up on my bed, and went to close my blinds on my window. That was when I noticed a man standing under the street lamp. I couldn't see his face, despite nothing really obscuring it, and he was wearing a suit. He wasn't too particularly tall, and I don't know what really stood out about him other than just him being there. I don't know why it gave me such an off feeling. I unmute myself and I sit back at my desk, letting my friends know about this and joking around about how maybe his Uber is late, or maybe his wife kicked him out. We also gave him the very creative nickname, Suit Man. After a few moments, I go back to the window to see if he's moved. He indeed had moved. He was now standing in front of across the street neighbor's backyard gate, which was visible from where I was due to it being located near the garage door. The longer I looked at him, I began to notice a couple of odd things. First of all, he wasn't facing the gate, and he was standing completely still. Second of all, I'd noticed that he hadn't triggered the neighbor's floodlights, which came on automatically when someone or something moved nearby. You had to cross over the driveway to get to the gate, which would set the lights off. At this point, I'm a little freaked out, but still really intrigued, and so I decided to grab my phone and try to take a picture. However, when I turned to look back at where this person was, even though I'd only looked away for a few moments to grab my phone and pull up my camera, he was gone. I just decided to hell with this and closed my blinds. I stayed on that VC most of the night since I was a little freaked out still and didn't want to try going to sleep anytime soon after such an odd encounter. Although this was pretty creepy in and of itself, the weirdest part came after this. For a few months after this, I would hear someone whistling while walking down the street at the exact same time each and every day. It stopped recently and I haven't heard it since, nor have I seen Suit Man, and I'm hoping that's the end of it. I'm hoping by telling this story, I don't make him show up again. That would be freaky. So I guess what I want all of you to know is, always check your windows before you go to bed. Many years ago, I used to work night shift at a hotel in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. During the season, it wasn't so bad, mostly families and stuff. We had on-site security then too. However, in the off-season, the winter month was different. The cheap weekly rates we'd offer attracted a lot of creepy people. The idea was supposed to be to make money in the off-season by renting to what is known as snowbirds, older retired people who came to the beach for a month or more through the winter. It did not always work out that way though. The cheap rates made it possible for a less than desirable element to become long-term residents. I've discovered more than my fair share of meth labs, broken up physical assaults, and more during the winter months. Working third shift, I would meet some interesting people. The cold weather would mean some homeless people would come in and get warm and grab a cup of free coffee. I wasn't supposed to let them, but it's not in me to be cruel. I would let them grab a coffee and get warm for a minute as long as they didn't cause trouble. As you can see, night shift in the winter made for some crazy and sometimes creepy stories. I have a lot, but this one is one that stands out because it didn't end well for me. I had a great night up to this point. I had gone to an indie wrestling show with my best friend before work. In fact, I had agreed to come an hour early the next night for the young lady that worked second shift in exchange for her working an hour later for me on this night, so I can enjoy the wrestling show. Ironically enough, I met Terry Funk that night, a wrestling legend known for his hardcore and bloody matches. Little did I know, I was about to experience this kind of violence for real. I was supposed to be there at midnight due to her working over an hour for me. I normally came in at 11. I counted the register and she briefed me on her shift as to what had happened as per usual. As she was leaving, my friend, we will call him Andrew, pulled up. He works second shift maintenance at this hotel, and the other two hotels are company owned. He would regularly stop by after work and go grab us some food, and we would play World of Warcraft on our laptops after eating for a while since business was so slow. He was just getting my money in order for food and getting ready to leave. I was excited, telling him how much fun I had at the wrestling show and was showing him my Terry Funk t-shirt I was so proud of. I was just walking into the back office to put the shirt up when I heard the doorbell indicating a customer had entered. It is true what they say, ask not for whom the bell tolls, it tolls for thee. I had turned around when I heard someone say something loudly, but I still couldn't make out what they had said. I had just reached the doorway when I saw Andrew just fall down in front of me. The next thing I know, a guy walks around the corner and punches me in the head with a short steel pipe in his hand. It staggered me and I went to one knee. The next thing I know, he hits me in the head with the pipe. The next thing I know after that, I hear the other guy, who I hadn't noticed at this point, say he got away and got a cop. They left out the door. I was finally able to get to my feet. I tried to call the police from the phone in the back office, but it was having issues. I slammed it in frustration. I was hurting and very scared. It really freaked me out. I realized that they could come back, so I ran and locked the door. I didn't know where Andrew had gone, and that worried me. I called 911 about this time. Blood had started pouring down my head. I told the operator I had been attacked and needed an officer and ambulance. I then called the other hotel we ran to let the night manager, named Travis, who was over all three properties, know what had happened. He thought I was messing with him at first, because when we got bored, we would prank each other. I finally convinced him I was not joking. He said he was going to lock up and come down. The cops and ambulance pulled up and I opened the door. It was at this time I found out after they sucker punched him and knocked him down, Andrew was able to amazingly jump over the desk and escape just as a cop was driving by, which he ran to flag them down for help. I ended up in the emergency room where I had to have 10 staples put into my scalp, and they gave me morphine for the pain. I had no way to get home after being treated, but the doctor and nurses took pity on me and paid for a cab. My plan was to go back to work because this was December and Christmas was coming. I had 3 kids and needed all the hours I could get. When I got back to the hotel, the IT guy, Ted, was there with his wife Barbara, who also worked at the front desk. She was shocked to see me. She thought I would still be in the hospital. I thought I had only been hit in the head once after being punched. The video which Ted was pulling up for the police showed a different story. After I had went to one knee, the guy had hit me not just once, but 10 total times. I kept trying to grab the pipe and get up for some reason. I do not remember that. I guess I was out on my feet. He kept punching me and hitting me with the pipe, till his friend tells him Andrew got away and then got the cops. The 2 of them then run out. I was given a room at the other hotel we own, and Ted and Barbara gave me a lift there, as I was in no condition to drive due to the morphine. They also gave me a paid week off to heal. They switched me over to the other hotel on night shift for a month, just in case they were after me in particular. We never found out why they chose to attack me. The police thought it might have been a failed strong arm robbery due to Andrew getting away and me just not going down. It shook me up though, not knowing. Even though I was at our other hotel when I came back to work the night shift, I was still nervous. Every time the door chimed, I tensed up. I couldn't afford to quit though, as I said. I had 3 kids I was supporting. They never caught the guys as far as I know. A detective stopped by about 2 months later when I was working second. He showed me several mugshots and asked me if any of them looked familiar. I never got a great look at them as it all happened so fast. I had seen the video, which wasn't the best quality. Even so, 2 of them looked very familiar, like them. I pointed them out and he asked me how sure I was. I told him honestly, like 85%. He then yelled and asked me if I wanted someone to go to jail for attempted murder on 85%. I was stunned. I just stood there in silence. I, of course, was the victim. I was attacked for no reason, and he is yelling at me like it's my fault. I was too busy being attacked to get a good look at them. I no longer work at a hotel and night shift, and I'm glad, because it is just too dangerous in this area. Warning, this story references animal sacrifice. Listening discretion is advised. Apologies for this being so long. My dad and I flipped houses for a living. We do everything, so house renovations can take anywhere from a couple of months to a year and up. Here's what happened to us in a 100-plus-year-old farmhouse in Northwest New Jersey, USA, about 3 years ago. This old farmhouse was beautiful, but extremely run down. It had sat vacant prior to our purchasing it for 15 years. Also, there was evidence squatters had been there at one point. The house had good bones, as they say, so it wasn't worth to tear it down and start from scratch. The first part of our job is the cleanup and demo. I've noticed that every house has its own vibe and energy. However, this old farmhouse was different. It was 4 floors, including basement and attic. Anytime you were downstairs on the main floor, kitchen, living room, and office, it felt fine, normal even. When you went upstairs, it was different. There was a heaviness up there. I would announce every time I came into the house, "Hey, it's just me. Is it cool if I come up and do such and such?" I also would announce myself anytime I came into the house downstairs with a, "Hey, how you doing today?" My dad would look at me like I was crazy because I never did this anywhere else. Ever. I don't know why I did it here, I just felt the need to. Like a deep itch in my brain. pleading me to say it, so I did, each and every time. Within the first few days of the clean-out and demo, my dad found something disturbing. In the master bedroom upstairs, there was a small closet with a light in it. Hanging on the inside of the closet door on a coat hook was a bloody dog collar. There were weird symbols spray-painted only in this closet. Something looked like it had been burned in a pile on the floor of the closet. I refused to touch it and got extremely upset at the sight of the dog collar. Furious even. What the f*** would do something to a poor animal like this? I was so bothered, my dad told me to go home for the day, and I did. Ugh, makes me sick thinking about the sick f*** who did whatever to have something like that there. My dad and other coworkers cleaned it out. Also, the light in that closet we never got to work. We do minor electrical repairs and couldn't figure it out. Had a master electrician come. They couldn't get it to work either. New light fixture, new wiring, new everything, and nothing worked. When we had finished cleaning out the living quarters, we decided to work on the attic and basement. Basement was okay. Honestly, the bottom half of the house, basement and second floor, kitchen, office, and living room, felt fine. Neutral even. The attic was terrible. I could not bring myself to go up there, not once. Not to be an asshole, I work on the other floors of the house. My dad understood without me even having to explain, which speaks volumes because he is real skeptical. One day, I had to hold the flashlight for my dad while he was in the attic. I stood on the stairs with only my head and upper torso sticking into the attic space. The lights never would work up there either. This attic had one of those pull down from the ceiling foldable ladder things. It was located in the hallway between the master bedroom, second bedroom, and only bathroom. The second we opened it, a rank-ass smell hit us hard in the face. Death. For sure, something must have died up here, we thought. There were those large black flies that seemed to swarm to rotten death everywhere. To say it was an infestation of flies is an understatement. I stood on the ladder, almost falling multiple times from ferociously swatting those demon bugs away. My dad looked everywhere for the cause of the flies, for days, and couldn't find anything. Before we sold the house, we finally got the flies to go away. This was after months of trying, by the way. However, when the new owner chose to rent the house out, the flies kept coming back. To this day, almost 3 years later, exterminators and pest control have been called and the flies still come back. The master bedroom had something else happen after the closet was cleaned up. I talked my dad into burying the dog collar, by the way. There were 4 windows in the master, 2 windows on the north wall and 2 on the west. The north wall windows one day suddenly had 2 bats on them. They were somehow wedged between the glass and the screen of this old window. We needed to replace all the windows, so we tried everything to free the bats without hurting them. We worked during the day, so bats being nocturnal, we figured it explained why they never moved during the day. When we would come the next day, they seemed to have moved overnight, so we knew that they were still alive. These poor bats had me seriously fretting. Any dead bugs I found during the cleanup, I would put into this windowsill, hoping they would eat. I know that's weird, but I don't care. I'm a die-hard animal lover. It appeared that we were stuck and it was killing me to see them like that. It made no logical sense how they got in there either. Also, it was early summer, so they weren't hibernating. My dad and I decided to get a ladder and try from the outside of the house. He finally got it so that the bats could undoubtedly get out. The bats never moved from that window screen for weeks. Then, one day, they were gone. I thought for a long time my dad had discovered they were dead and disposed of them, as to not upset me. He promises he didn't do this, and that after weeks of them moving barely inches, they had indeed left, of their own volition. We finished the house and then sold it. The new owner rented it out to tenants. Tenants would move in, stay for a month or two, then break their leases and move out. This has happened 4 times since we finished. After each move out, we were contracted to come and do a fresh coat of paint, deep clean, patch up a hole, or any other fix needed. The feeling in the house never changed. Also, I wanted to add that we told the new owner about all the weirdness prior to them purchasing. My dad is a skeptical guy and has no explanation for any of this stuff. My dad also now announces himself anytime we go into the house. We met every tenant that lived there at some point in their rental time. They all seem like normal people and not the type to just break their leases for no reason. I feel like the house needs a cleaning or, I don't know, something. To whoever did that poor dog and house dirty, may you reap what you sow. This happened when I was in my teens. I can't remember exactly when, but I think it was about 17 at this point. It was school holidays and I was at home with my friend. We'll call her Talia. And my domestic worker. We'll call her Lesigo. It was around 11 a.m. and we were just hanging out in my room. Lesigo had been washing dishes when she glanced out of the window. And in another window, she saw the reflections of 2 men in our backyard. She ran upstairs to tell me what she had seen, and I immediately hit the panic button. The alarm started sounding loudly throughout the house. I remember calling my dad to tell him what was happening, but he was working quite a way away and would take some time to get there. I believed he called the police at this point. I wanted to run downstairs and lock the security gate at the bottom of the stairs, but at that point, even over the loud wailing of the alarm system, we could distinctly hear the crack of wood splintering as they broke open the back door of the house. I was worried that they would be faster than us and decided not to go downstairs. Instead, we raced across the upstairs landing to lock ourselves in my parents' bedroom. We reached the bedroom door and... damn, there's no key. We ran back across the landing again, and just as we were passing the top of the stairs, we saw those 2 men bounding up them just a meter or 2 away. They were large men over 6 feet tall, clutching in their hands a screwdriver and a rope. Not a good sign. Lesigo tried to grab our cell phones from the guest room as we passed. One of the men slapped her across the face, grabbed the phones, and pushed her into the room. Talia and I kept running, with the 2 men just a couple of meters behind us. We reached the end of the landing, dashed into my mom's office, and I slammed the door hard behind me. My heart sank as I heard the clink of the key hitting the opposite wall. It had been on the other side of the door. At this point, Talia is hysterical, crying in the corner with both hands on her head as I held the door shut. What are we gonna do? Oh my God, oh my God. I felt strangely calm. I just remember thinking that I could not let anything happen to her. Knock, knock. Hello? I was in utter disbelief as the 2 intruders calmly knocked on the office door, as if this was the most normal thing in the world. We did not respond. And then again, knock, knock. Hello? Once again, we did not respond. The 2 men then started turning the doorknob and pushing the door open. I tried to stop the knob from turning, but I just couldn't get a good grip on it. I pushed back on the door, digging my heels into the carpet as deep as possible. Just then, the phone starts to ring. I knew it was armed response. I shouted to Talia, "Answer the phone and tell them what's happening. Speak loudly." I wanted the intruders to know that someone was on their way. While she was on the phone with security, I was fighting these two men with all of my strength for control of the door. They pushed it open wide enough for a small adult to slip through, and I shoved back with all my might and got it just about shut again. It felt like this went on forever, but in reality it was probably only a few minutes. The whole time the alarm was blaring loudly. Eventually the men left, and after waiting it out for a while, we felt safe enough to leave the room. My dad got there first, and we told him everything that had happened. Armed response arrived 45 minutes after we spoke to them on the phone. Like, gee, thanks, we'd be dead already or worse. The police arrived 2 hours after them. Yeah, no one relies on cops in South Africa. It was only when we were explaining the whole thing to the cops that the reality started to set in and the adrenaline started to wear off. I went into shock and was all shaky for a bit, but I felt grateful that everyone was okay. I am still amazed at what adrenaline can do. How does a tiny teenage girl hold back two huge, fully grown men? It's insane. After that day, I really realized what I am capable of when shit hits the fan. And also that if shit does go down, you rely on your own and you need to have a plan, because the chances are no one is going to get there in time to actually help you. So yeah, that was probably the scariest thing that has ever happened to me. I've never really had any reason to be truly scared. Looking back, there isn't one experience I can think of that truly terrified me. I've jumped countless times from sudden loud noises or catching something move in my peripheral vision. I cannot recall ever fully screaming or shouting, but maybe that's because I'm not a very outspoken person anyway and would rather mask my feelings from others. I lost my eldest daughter once. She was 2 and we were in B&Q, a hardware store. They have model bathrooms and kitchens. There I am admiring some taps or tiles or whatever it was. I turn around to the shower she was messing in and poof, gone. That was terrifying, but I wasn't scared. I was more frantic. Full disclosure, I found her taking a dump on one of the display toilets. Not my proudest moment having to tell the employee they needed a cleanup in aisle 6. Anyway, so I haven't ever really been terrified. Except once. It happened back when I was 17. I'd left school that summer and had 6 weeks before starting college. It was baking hot in the small rural town that I lived in, situated pretty much in the middle of England. It's an old coal mining town and a bit of British history here. All the mines were closed down, which decimated both the economy and job opportunities of the small pit towns throughout the country. Back to my town, if you're old enough, or at least look old enough, you spend your time in the local pubs. If you're not, you have nothing else to do but roam the streets, seeking your own entertainment. Me and my friends were the latter. On the main road through town, away from the other houses, stood a dilapidated house known as the O'Briens. A 4-story, 6-bedroom mansion compared to all the other houses in town. There was an old couple who lived there who, at this point, had passed away some years prior, called, you guessed it, the O'Briens. They had 2 daughters who had moved abroad and had never claimed the house. so it just sat for years, building up dust and rotting away. A perfect opportunity for somewhere cool, private, and exciting for 6 teenagers to hang out. The house had a ridiculously big back garden, which was equally ridiculously overgrown. It literally took us the good part of a day to stomp down a pathway through the nettles and brush. Once through, there was a garage that we could drop down into, which we pulled up the roof of to gain access. We spent nearly all summer in that house, hanging out, graffitiing the walls, drinking, smoking, etc. But there was one room that eluded us. From the garage, you headed through a kitchen, which now only consisted of a broken window that had been boarded up and a damaged set of cabinets on the back wall. You then stepped into a hallway which looked right through to the front door, with a bathroom and 2 large rooms on the left-hand side. On the right were the stairs to the second floor. The staircase was built against a wall and had wooden planks running vertical. Directly opposite the kitchen door, built into the back of the staircase, was a large metal door that had been painted white. The paint now a sickly yellow, dusty color and flaky. The door was locked. It just simply wouldn't budge. And looking at the hinges, it opened inwards. The house was big enough that we just kind of forgot about the locked door. We'd spend most days up in the 2 rooms of the 3rd floor, away from the road, outside to avoid any passerby hearing us and phoning the cops. That was until one of the lads decided, for no apparent reason, to light the moth-ridden curtain on fire with a Zippo he was messing with. The curtain, dust-covered carpet and old, crinkled wallpaper, went up in seconds. We only made it out by smashing the top window and jumping onto a dirt mound at the side of the garage. I think if adrenaline hadn't been coursing through us, it would have been a hell of a painful fall. We hid in some bushes over the road and watched the fire engine put out the flames, but before that, it had engulfed the 2nd and 3rd floor. The 2nd was still usable once we got the courage to re-enter the house, but the 3rd was gone. Just the outer walls and what was left of the roof. It's a shame, really. So, we were confined to the bottom floor. The garage was too dark to see in, and only had a old table we'd found that you'd normally use to put the paste on wallpaper. We used it to get in and out of the roof. The kitchen wasn't much brighter, and the front room had a big window that overlooked the footpath and road outside, so that left us a small, bleak back room to chill in, which got boring very quickly. Boredom led to curiosity, and I noticed that one of the wooden planks on the side of the stairs was loose, and that there was an open space behind it. Finally, we could see what was behind the metal door. What a mistake that was. They say curiosity killed the cat, but in this instance, it questioned my whole belief. The wooden panels were surprisingly hard to pull off, even for 6 fairly athletic teenagers. So we went out scouting and brought back a few torches and a crowbar. It was still a slog, but we finally managed to remove 2.5 of the panels. Shining the light into the hole revealed another staircase that led downwards. Yet, it looked as though it was decades older than the rest of the house. Cobwebs engulfed every surface, and the stench of musk and damp attacked your nostrils if you got anywhere near the hole. After some giddy behavior, some pushing and shoving, and a game of 6-man rock, paper, and scissors, I grabbed a torch and slowly stuck my head through the hole. The room was darker than dark, so dark that the beam from the torch could be seen cutting through the blackness. I shone it down the staircase first. It went really deep. The hole we had made was maybe 4 or 5 steps from the door, and there were at least 25 below it. At the bottom, a wall and a doorway to the left. I swung the torch to the right, towards the metal door, not expecting to see what I saw at all. The door was definitely locked tight, with 3 separate deadlocks that ran down the side, all barred. But what caught me by surprise was on the small lip of the top step, pushed firmly against the door, was a really outdated fridge. The ones that were squared and about waist high. I told the lads stood behind me and they laughed, thinking I was joking. One by one they stuck their head in the hole, checked out the bottom of the stairs and then the fridge. Each one as confused as myself. I remember sitting down, smoking a cigarette, and debating how and why it would be there. The door clearly opened inwards, which meant the door must have been locked from the inside. Then somehow the fridge put up against it from the inside. We spent the rest of the day checking the garage and surrounding area of the house for a trap door or another entrance or exit to the cellar, but couldn't find anything. We put it down to the sheer size and state of the garden and went home. The next few visits to the house was us trying to decide who would enter the cellar first. No one wanted to. And no matter how many games of rock, paper, scissors we played, it was always best out of a higher number, until one day I'd had enough. We were sat in a circle in the other room, messing with stuff and just generally chatting, except me. I just sat and stared at this hole, this dark void in the wall. Finally, I got up, exclaimed my intentions, took the torch from my pocket, and stepped inside. Everyone else quickly and very excitedly followed. Immediately, the first few layers of the wooden steps just disintegrated under my foot. They turned into a mulch of damp splinters that clung to the sole of my shoe when I lifted my foot. It was worrying, but the stairs seemed sturdy enough. Each step I took downwards, the temperature dropped rapidly, and the air seemed to get thicker and thicker. The inches of dust that I kicked up didn't help also. Admittedly, I was a little scared, but I had 5 other lads behind me, so it was impossible to turn tail now. I headed down and reached the second to last step. I could see the doorway, which led to an open room. Pausing, I regained my courage with a few shaky deep breaths and stepped in. The room was in a worse state than the stairs. Webs littered the rafters and floorboards above like moss. They hung from the ceiling in clumps, all tarnished with dust, weirdly. Thinking about it now, we never saw any spiders though. The floor was carpeted in a layer of debris from the rotting wood above, dust and dirt. It was a miracle none of us ever fell through the floor above. This place was a mess. The room was huge, expanding underneath the bathroom and both rooms on the first floor, and it was dark. There was no light source other than the torches 3 of us now carried. The room stood empty, except for a wooden table smack bang in the middle. No chair. Nothing around it. But on it stood a metal plate, crudely bashed into shape, with the remnants of a black goo on it. Next to the plate stood a tall, uncorked green bottle. One of the boys went over to it and picked it up. It sloshed as he did so, with a liquid of deep brown and layers of dirt inside. I never smelled it, but apparently it was putrid. At first, we didn't see the other doorway. It was in the corner directly opposite the one we had entered. No door, just total darkness. We tried to shine our torches through it, but they didn't seem to cut through the shadows. It was like there was actually a door there, one that drained the torchlight. For some reason, I didn't muster the courage to go into that room, and neither did anyone else. We simply turned and left, feeling like we had had enough adventure for that day. Over the next week or so, we invited girls and other friends to the house, but all refused to enter the basement. We found this hilarious and would dare one another, more to show off than anything, to go down there either on their own or in pairs without a flashlight and see how long we could stay down there. Now, not once did I get scared while stood in complete darkness down there. It was kind of calming, but none of us ever got the courage to enter the other room. In hindsight, we should have questioned more why the door was metal or why it was locked from the inside, and how a fridge got up the stairs and plated in front of the door as a barrier from the inside also. But, full of excitement and immaturity, it never crossed our minds. We just assumed that there would be some sort of other exit in the other room, which led to the garden. Word quickly got round through the year groups of the O'Brien basement, and we definitely fed the rumors of it being haunted. Teenagers would ask us how to get into the house and for us to show them the barricaded door and basement. So, because we thought we were cool, we spent another day making a maze in the garden, squashing pathways down that led away from the garage. We would then invite people into the house, lead them through the garden, into the garage, and show them the hole in the stairs. It got quite popular, and we decided to cash in on the opportunity. We told people that if they wanted to see the basement, then they would have to do the initiation. As they came in, we would have one person sat on the fridge and another at the bottom of the stairs, both with torches, and send the people into the room first, telling them that they had to stay in there for 10 minutes with the torches turned off, and then we would let them out. This went on for a while, and it was fun at first. A lot of people bottled it as soon as the torches were turned off, but some stayed. We cheers from back up the stairs when they completed it. It was a cheesy little ritual recreated, but still, everyone refused to go into the other room. When questioned, they just said they didn't feel comfortable, until my little brother and his friend came. They were 2 years younger than us, and initially, we refused to let anyone who wasn't our age into the house. We were there all the time, and there were 6 of us in the friend group, so it was pretty easy to deter people away if they managed to find the entrance at the garage. But after constant pestering and the initial curiosity of others dwindling, we decided to invite them along. We made a big deal out of it, talking them to the dilapidated fence at the back of the garden and tying their jumpers around their faces as we led them blind through the maze of shrubbery and thorns to the garage. It was a decent drop from the hole in the roof, and even though my brother managed it, his friend had to be lowered down by his arms. Once inside, they were met with the stench of smoke that lingered from the floors above. We walked them through the kitchen and showed them the makeshift entrance to the basement. We told them the story of the metal door and how it didn't make sense, and gave them the option of staying in the first floor in pitch black for 10 minutes or go in the second room in pitch black for 5 minutes. An offer a lot of people initially picked until they got down the staircase. "Second room," they said in unison. We all laughed, expecting them to change their minds immediately. One of the lads slipped through the hole in the wooden boards and turned right, heading up the stairs and positioning himself on the fridge. I went through next and positioned myself at the foot of the stairs. I'd like to say, at this point, all of us regulars felt complete comfort going down to the bottom of the stairs, practically alone. We'd all taken it in turns when bringing people down here, and had done it numerous times each, so this time was no different. There was a giddy, nervous atmosphere when the 2 youngsters entered the staircase. The torches we used were cheap ones we'd gotten from the market, so they cast an eerie yellow glow. Slowly, my brother and his friend made it down the stairs, clearly attempting to show face and act unmoved by the state of the rotten, decaying wood around them. But as they trenched through the mulch, they stuck closer together. They took their time, so much so the guy at the top shouted for them to hurry, and both nearly shit their pants. When they finally got to me, I told them that this was the first room, shining the torch around the room through the doorway, and that they were to go into the next one, aiming my beam through the darkness to the frame of the other door. The room was a decent size, and as stated, the torches were cheap, but I remember taking notice that the beam that cut through the first room never seemed to illuminate the second room at all, as if it was an object obstructing its path. My brother's friend walked into the room, and as my brother walked past me, I grabbed his shoulder and told him that he did not have to do this, and if he did, then he could back out whenever. With a nod and a dismissive wave, he followed his friend. They crossed the room, past the table, and disappeared through the second doorway, as if walking through a dark stage curtain. I hit the button on my Casio watch to start the countdown from 5 minutes. I then aimed the beam of my torch up the staircase. The guy sitting on the fridge smiled excitedly and watched his watch. "I really need to piss, dude. I'll be right back," he said, jumping down and disappearing back through the gap. I stood at the bottom of those steps for what seemed like forever. I could hear the faint giggles from across the first room. They seemed muffled, as if hearing voices from behind a door. "How long left?" my brother's voice shouted. 3.5 minutes, I replied, checking my watch. Now, in the basement, despite it obviously being underground, there was never an uncomfortable temperature. It was colder than upstairs, but had no bite. There was never a chill. And, while being down there countless amount of times, not once had any of us felt any sort of breeze. But, and this memory still haunts me a little, especially when there is a sudden shift in temperature. I noticed that I became very cold, stood at the bottom of the stairs, to the point where I could see my breath when checking the time against the light on my watch face. The mumbles from the other room had stopped also. I tried to focus on them, see if I could hear any movement or any nervous noises they had been making before. But nothing. I remember getting freaked out. I don't know what about, but I could feel my heart beating faster. The hairs on my arms and the back of my neck stood on end. I turned on the torch and stepped into the first room. "Yo, you guys all right?" I called out. Nothing. No reply. "Oh, stop f***ing about. Time's up," I called again, and again, no reply. I shone the torch through the doorway of the second room, but just like before, it was as if the beam cut through the first room and then stopped at the doorway. I crept closer, calling my brother's name, but he never replied. Then, as clear as day, so loud it hurt my ears after the silence, a voice, deep, brash, and distorted, as if the sound had been twisted, bellowed. "Leave now." I froze on the spot, eyes fixated on the doorway. Then, emerging from the gloom ran my brother and his friend, both as white as snow, both with tears and snot streaming down their faces. The look of pure terror on their faces is something I have never been able to get rid of. They bolted straight past me, which snapped me out of the trance, and I followed suit. Before we could reach the doorway to the stairs, the sound of crashing came from the stairwell. 4 ridiculously loud bangs and the noise of snapping wood. The fridge was embedded into the wall at the bottom of the staircase. Without stopping, we all scrambled over it. The staircase itself was a complete mess. Large splinters of wood stuck up like spikes. Luckily, and I don't know how, we managed to clamber up on our hands and feet without injury. Halfway up, I looked towards the hole in the wall, praying it would be in reaching distance. Both the young lads were in front of me, both sobbing and screaming. Both ran straight past the hole in the wall. The metal door, locked before and with no key, we looked everywhere for it, stood open. Light from the garage exit spilled through the kitchen and down into the basement, as if it showed us the quickest way out. Instinct had set in by this point, and all three of us darted through the door, onto the table, and up through the garage. My brother's friend, too small to get down on his own, managed to get out without help. We ran through the garden maze. At some point, I had to grab a hold of my brother to stop him from going down one of the many dead ends we had created, and, without word, took the lead. We raced to the fence, squeezed through the hole, and collapsed on the field behind the property. I looked around, and there, also set on the grass, staring at the three of us, was everyone else who had been in the house. No one said a word. Everyone looked as scared as each other, except for the two younger boys. They wept, for a long time actually, as we all just sat there in silence and let them do it. Once they had stopped, we all got up, without a word, and went home. My brother said nothing to me on the way, or when we got back. He just simply went into his room. I went into mine, and that was the end of that. No one went into that house again. It stood for a year or two, then was demolished. Apparently, one of the daughters had finally come over and claimed the land, only to sell it to some new build project. Now, a group of houses sit where the garden and house were. Nice-looking houses, to be fair. My brother still refuses to walk past that estate. They never built on the land directly above the cellar. Apparently, and I've never actually had this confirmed, but the builders refused to fill the cellar in for some reason. Just bricked it up and left it as open space despite being able to fit a perfectly good house on there. We only brought it up once within the friends group, and only because I convinced myself that it had been one of them that had opened the door somehow and moved the fridge. But they all swore it wasn't. They said that as soon as it started getting really cold in the house, they got spooked. They heard the voice and headed for the kitchen. Noticed the door was open when they heard the loud bangs and bolted. I tried asking my brother about the room, but he completely shut down when I did. He quickly stopped being friends with the kid who went down with him, said they no longer had anything relevant to talk about. There are pictures that show the house after the fire. You can see the smashed windows from the fire brigade and the black from the smoke around the top windows. The garage is behind, can't see it in the photo. Also, photos of the cleared land and of the new build, with the obvious patch of grass where the basement would have been. Just to preface this is a temporary account, as I am in pure fear still that somehow this person will track this back to me. I live in a quiet neighborhood in a suburban town in Queensland, Australia with my roommate. We are childhood friends and are both finishing our studies at uni. The occurrence has started around 2 months ago, with the most recent update only last weekend. About 2 months ago, I cannot recall the actual date, I was lying in bed at night, watching a soccer game, drifting in and out of sleep. I usually just use the background noise to help me fall asleep, as I would say I'm a very nocturnal person. I feel like I was on the edge between being awake and asleep when I heard an urgent pounding on the door. The way the house is shaped, my bedroom is approximately 10 meters from the front door and backs onto the front courtyard. The knock startled me at first, as I was unsure if it was just in my head, so I literally laid still in silence to see if I heard anything else. I knew it couldn't be my roommate, as she was out of town for the week visiting family and attending a wedding. Shortly after, there was a second knock, just as hard, but no one yelled out or said anything. I'd like to say that I'm not easily scared and enjoy watching horror movies in my free time, but I found myself frozen in place, not able to move. No further knocks came, but I was too frightened to fall back asleep and didn't end up resting until around 4 a.m. I called my roommate in the morning, asking her if she knew anyone that could have come to our door in the night, but she was just as confused as I was. A week passed by, and I didn't really think much of it anymore. I sort of came to the conclusion that it was maybe someone drunk that mistaken our house as theirs, as it was a Saturday night when it happened. I work in a large chain grocery store doing night stocking a few days a week, with my shifts ending between 2 and 4 a.m., usually. It was the next Saturday, and I was approaching the end of my shift, when my roommate texted me saying someone was knocking on the front door again. Even though I wasn't there, I was struck with the same kind of fear I had experienced the week prior. She reassured me that the doors were all locked, but was scared knowing the same thing happened to me the week prior. She kept in touch with me until my shift was over, and told me that there was no second knock. When I arrived home, the front yard seemed untouched, and there was no one out walking the street. I must reinstate, it is a very quiet neighborhood, with many elderly couples living on our street. In the morning, my roommate still seemed a bit shook up, so I put in an anonymous tip with a Crime Stopper service, but they never got back to me. Nothing else happened for the following month and a half. We were both going on with our lives like it never happened, but I stopped working Saturday nights, as this was the only similarity between the two occurrences. That was until the most recent Saturday. I was up late in the living room watching some old Black Mirror episodes, as the new season was about to come out. It was around 1 a.m., and I had plans to go to bed after the episode I was watching. For context, the lounge room is practically right next to the front door, with the path to the door going past a large window. As I was watching, I saw the outside motion sensor light turn on from the bottom of the windowsill under the blinds. I froze. Up until this point, I had completely forgotten about the knocking, and I was struck in fear. A short moment later, bang, bang, bang. At first, I was just going to sit there and wait for them to go, but after a second loud knock, I decided to look through the peephole quietly to see if it was someone familiar. My roommate had a few failed relationships that didn't end on good terms, so I assumed maybe, just maybe, it could be one of them. It wasn't. It was a woman. She was staring at the front door extremely still. It was like she was frozen, her eyes staring straight ahead with little to no expression. It felt like she could see me through the eye hole, just staring into my soul. I couldn't move. She stood there for another 2 or so minutes, until she looked to the side and ran off. I called the cops and explained on the phone what had happened, and they sent someone out shortly later. They checked the cars parked on the street, but came up empty-handed, as there was no damage, and told me to call back if anything happened again. The thing that I couldn't get out of my head was the way she stood there emotionless, staring straight ahead, and the way she ran off. She looked to be in her mid-30s, maybe 40, but was wearing a small nightdress and no shoes. Not only was this out of the ordinary, but it was freezing outside. Since then, I have ordered one of those doorbell cameras in case she does come back. But to be completely honest, I flinch whenever someone knocks on that door now. And that, dear listeners, is the end of these true scary Reddit stories. If you are sleeping, I hope Slumberland is treating you kindly. If you're awake, I hope you've enjoyed this collection. Until next time, I'll read to you soon. Have yourself a good morning, a good afternoon, or a good night.